Is God a white racist?
Oh no, this is good. Oh.
The only sin in audio is dead air, and you gave me dead air.
No, I didn't see this coming. Oh man, I don't know how to respond to this.
Welcome back to Post-Denomination, the fake church service run by a seminarian and a failed grad student in hopes to dunk on and debunk the funky shit Christians say. My name is Jonathan, joined as always by Connor, and today we're talking about race.
Oh no.
Where does your mind go when you hear the question?
Where does my mind go when I hear this question? I mean, my initial response is most definitely not.
You want to elaborate there?
Oh man, I'm so bad at this.
It's okay. We'll fix it in post.
Is God a white racist?
Yeah.
Is God racist towards white people? That's the question, right?
In favor of.
Okay. Is God in favor of white people? Yeah. God is in favor of the white race, for sure.
To a discriminatory degree.
To the detriment of other races?
To other races. Specifically, in this case, black people, like indigenous people. And to lesser extents, the whole spectrum of colorism. Yeah.
What do you think, Jonathan?
Well, we'll talk about that. But you know what? Do you have an idea of where it might come from?
Where the question comes from?
Yeah. Where I took the question. Because it is not a Jonathan original.
Yeah. So, I mean, see, it's just so boring. My answers are going to be so boring. Like, I think Kierkegaard's distinction between like Christ and Christendom, right? So is God in favor of the white race? No. Has Christianity throughout, or I guess in its latter half of its history, been in favor of the white race? Probably, yes. That's, yeah. Oh, man.
I mean, it is. So
boring.
You're kind of getting to it. Do you know what Southern strategy is?
I do not.
This one you probably should censor. But Lee Atwater, a political consultant for the Grand Old Party, did not censor himself when he spoke very candidly in an interview about the shift in rhetoric that the Republicans took.
Oh, I think I know this quote. Okay, Jesus.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, Lord. On the first episode. Okay. Why are you getting me to say this?
We gotta break up the monotony of me talking, dude.
Okay. You start out in 1954 by saying, what should I say here? Like, pejorative, pejorative, pejorative. Bad word, bad word, bad word. By 1968, you can't say bad word. That hurts you. Backfires. So you say stuff like, forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract. Now you're talking about cutting taxes, and all these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and a byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. We want to cut this is much more abstract than even the busing thing, and a hell of a lot more abstract than pejorative.
Racial slur and racial slur. Yeah. Later in that interview, he actually talks about how the worry was that people would start voting for their own economic interests. And he was worried that would destabilize the status quo because obviously the 99% outnumber the 1%. And so for the 1% to remain on top, they need to pivot away from material policy positions.
Right.
And it's in the abstractions that Lee Atwater talks about that we start to see a co-optation of like nominally Christian values. So it's not just states' rights and bus rights. It's like states' rights, your God-given right to the Second Amendment, You start having religious language start to really be front and center.
Right.
In that cultural, I want to say milieu, but I don't even know if that's the right word. The church, for their part, didn't just stand idle. They stood completely silent.
Right.
We're having big social changes, and not just about race, but like in the post-war era, we're talking nuclear disarmament, we're talking the hippie movement, the anti-war movement, movements against economic colonialism. We have like McCarthyism. And during that time, we saw a very like obvious silence on these matters by the church. Pierre Berton, CBC journalist, Berton had asked the Anglican Church of Canada to do basically a self-report study among its members, asking like, in the last year, have you talked about these topics? 27% said they had a sermon related to current events in the last year. About half made some remark
Some remark.
Yeah, just said, hey, this is happening. And in contrast to that, Berton writes, over 70% had preached at least once on the subject of church unity.
Wow.
Yeah, which begs the question, what kind of fucking unity these people are talking about when there's a racial reckoning that they're completely ignoring? So this question is lifted verbatim from a book that was published in 1973 by William R. Jones. He's a black theologian, and he was looking at what other black theologians were saying about the problem of evil. For him, he notes that theodicy, which is the response to the problem of evil, isn't just apologetic, meaning it's not just to help like maintain faith for people with like a sagging belief system, in his words. He wanted to be more constructive than that. He thought theology was an extension of theodicy.
Right.
But he wanted to tackle the question not just in the abstract, right? He's not talking about evil out there. He's talking about the evil that he was witnessing and that other black theologians were talking about. And that was in the 70s, I mean, all the way through. As an American theologian, it was about the anti-black racism. And the particularity of the ethnic suffering was very like important to him.
Right.
I sent you the quote before already, but to talk about why that's so important, he quotes Sartre's Anti-Semitism Jew. Oh, message is too long. I pay for Zoom services and they can't even give me 250 words.
Okay. Jews have one friend, however, the Democrat, but he is a feeble protector. No doubt he proclaims that all men have equal rights, but his own declarations show the weakness of his position. He recognizes neither Jew, nor Arab, no Negro. Okay. He recognizes neither Jew, nor Arab, nor Negro, but only man. Man always the same in all times and all places. The Democrat fails to see the particular case. It follows that his defense of the Jew saves the latter as man and annihilates him as Jew. This means that he wants to separate the Jew from his religion, from his family, from his ethnic community. For a Jew, conscious and proud of being Jewish, asserting a claim to be a member of the Jewish community without ignoring on that account the bonds which unite him to the national community, there may not be so much difference between the anti-Semite and the Democrat. The former wishes to destroy him as a man and leave nothing in him but the Jew. The latter wishes to destroy him as a Jew and leave nothing in him but the man.
Yeah. And so we see here Sartre and obviously Jones later talking about, I mean, Sartre calls him the Democrat, but, you know, the white liberal, the white moderate. And this is a response to like a colorblind position that those supposed allies take from time to time.
Right.
It's this position that like, why does race have to matter so much? Why can't we all be friends? And you can only say that when you're not being killed for that particular characteristic. Right. This is in 73. I mean, we had Fred Hampton getting assassinated by the government in like 69, I think. MLK getting assassinated in 68. Malcolm X, I want to say like 64, 5, something like that. Yeah. Like, and those are like big names. To bring it sort of to modern times, I feel like we're at the same fork in the road. There are a whole lot of Christians either upholding racism, I don't know, by accident or uncritically maybe,
right,
to be nice about it, or are explicitly racist.
Explicitly racist in the sense of willful ignorance, or?
Explicitly racist in the sense that like, maybe they wouldn't use a term and maybe they wouldn't use the pejorative that Lee Atwater uses, but that they have a position or they hold the assumption that Christianity is a white religion.
Interesting. And you think that's an explicit assumption?
I think if they were asked, they would probably fumble into that answer.
Interesting.
Future Jonathan here. As I was editing this, I realized how unsubstantiated this claim is. We do go over it in a lot more detail and sort of just with citations in a future episode on Christian nationalism. Stay tuned for that.
And so there's those groups of people, which I think are the ones that are going out in massive flocks to support both Trump's former presidency and his current candidacy. And we're talking about like 80% white evangelicals voting for him. That is the most monolithic voting bloc that I can think of.
Right.
And then there's also the people who just feel uncomfortable talking about it. And James Cone, big name in black theology, in 2000 wrote, If white theologians can see how the failure to engage anti-Semitism, classism, and sexism can destroy the credibility of theological discourse, why are they so blind to the poison of racism that corrupts Christian theological discourse? So how do we respond to the charge of God's racism?
Dead air. No dead air. That wasn't a rhetorical question, was it?
No. Hey,
you're looking for answers, and you're asking the white man.
I'm asking the white man. I mean, there are two non-Christian answers.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, like the problem of evil, what's one response you can give to the problem of evil?
It's not a problem.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
You can dismiss that there's any logical inconsistency between the existence of God and the existence of evil. I think what we have present in what the case that you have given is an evidential problem of evil.
Mm-hmm.
It seems unlikely that there would exist a God that supports this kind of white supremacist regime. Two answers. Your two non-Christian answers.
Maybe there's more non-Christian answers.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Two non-Christian answers. The first one would obviously be God doesn't exist. Yeah. There's this God that you worship is a fairy tale.
Yeah.
What would be the second one?
That God is racist.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad that you made that the non-Christian answer.
Well, I guess we'll assume that these are unsatisfactory to a degree, right? We don't have to go too far in, but assuming that there is belief in God, and assuming that that belief is somewhat justified, and that this God, like I was saying, at least about the stories in the Gospels, don't mesh well with a white supremacist, I don't think.
Clearly not.
Yeah.
Clearly not.
Doesn't seem like they would go well together. I don't know if a neo-Nazi today would be friends with Jesus of Nazareth.
I mean, Jesus of Nazareth, the Jew.
From Palestine, like...
Definitely not.
So if we're going to say God is not racist, that position is sort of like self-evidently contradictory. And we want to maintain our faith to some extent.
Yeah. How do we respond?
Connor on the spot.
I don't like this one bit.
Let's test your theology.
Oh man, this is horrible. Oh man. Okay, so how are we formulating this problem? The problem is
there's the evidential portion, I guess, but then there's God is omnipotent, supposedly omnibenevolent and omniscient, and yet this kind of ethnic suffering exists, and not just like in part, but like structurally, like it is everywhere.
Right. And I think the heart of the issue is not that it exists. It's that the people that are supposed to be defending the very people that are supposed to be doing the opposite are the ones perpetrating it.
Why is God not responsible, causally responsible?
I mean, it's the oldest answer in the book, but because humans have been endowed with free will.
There you go.
That's
dude,
what you were pushing me towards, dude.
Yeah, you knew it.
But that's like cliche.
He does. Jones calls it the humanocentric theism. And so why his challenge is maybe a little bit more controversial when he says it explicitly is that he rejects a theocentric theism, I guess. Okay. God is not the prime mover of our history here on Earth.
Yeah.
Human agency is. And so I know humans have free will is a not sexy answer, but put it that way, saying no, humans are the main agent.
Right.
I think maybe some Christians would probably have a little bit of unease around there.
I think a lot of people would say that's getting a little too close to deism. Yeah. Right. This offhands God creates and then okay, you guys do your thing. Right. But I think that's the story that you get throughout the Bible, right? That God works through human history. Yeah. And that the main mover is human action.
Arguably, sometimes we have very clear instances of divine intervention.
Right.
Or if you want to take like maybe a subtler position, God's intervention is irresistible. When God commands you to do something, you can't not do it. Yeah. Not a position I take.
Calvinist entered that building? What the heck
I'm not. But, if you want to keep God at the center of history, it's difficult not to attribute some blame of the whole project of racism
still
at his feet.
Do that.
Yeah.
I don't think ultimately Theodicy's any theodicy that's given, I don't think ultimately solves the problem of evil in any of its forms, whether we're talking about this anti-black racism form.
Right.
William Rowe has a paper called The Evidential Argument from Evil, and in it he discusses this. He talks about this friendly atheism, and I from that I sort of get this friendly theism, where I think the problem of evil actually gives you good reason to believe that there's not a God, and the friendly atheism / friendly theism part of his argument is that doesn't necessarily mean you're not rational for believing the contrary. So you can be rational in holding either, but the fact that it does seem to be the case that God allows this horrible anti-black racism to occur, or whatever you want to do, these deer horribly suffering in the woods because of forest fires and all these cases, that whether
I want to point out that you just compared the history of anti-black racism in America to a deer caught in a forest fire. Which, I don't know if you want to stand by that analogy.
Do you think that's
comparison?
But that's horrible suffering.
Okay, I agree.
The example that's often used in literature is this deer. There's this forest fire going on. The deer's like all distressed and stuff. And
I'm not trying to take away from the suffering of the deer.
And then a tree falls on the deer, right?
And that deer lost its parent because a hunter shot it last summer.
Listen here, okay, it's different. The deer, a tree falls on the deer, and then its legs are broken or whatever, and it's trapped under the weight of this tree. And then the fire comes, and it burns half of its body, and then the smoke is like filling its lungs, and it takes like 2 weeks for this deer to die.
I didn't think you
didn't think I'd double down.
I just wanted to point it out, and I thought we were gonna move on, but you are making me more uncomfortable now.
It's horrible suffering.
I agree.
Don't belittle this deer's suffering. This is horrible suffering.
And I don't want to sound too utilitarian, but we're talking about a deer in a forest fire. And the people for like 400 years,
There's been a lot of deers in evolutionary history.
And a lot of forest fires.
And a lot of forest fires and volcanoes and all that shit.
Yes.
Okay?
Sure.
Anyways, it's a little bit of a side. I get your point. Yeah. No, they're not equivalent in any sense, and I would never make that claim.
I would never do that.
The point is just simply that seeing these sort of states of affairs seems to give you evidence and makes you rational in your disbelief in God. And I think that's fair. And so maybe Cohn's position, like maybe it's a good defense, but I think
this is Jones.
Okay, yeah. I don't think if you reject Jones's defense, if you reject Jones's theodicy, that you're being irrational.
And Cohn disagrees with Jones, or maybe Jones.
Dude, Cohn and Jones like
disagrees with
that's
Cohn.
Too. I need some faces. I need some faces to the names.
Let me back up. I just want to back up a little bit just to highlight the difference. Jones' starting position and Cohn's starting position. Because for Jones, he's not assuming like the biblical narrative. He doesn't want to start there. Yeah.
Jones is not assuming the biblical narrative.
Exactly. He doesn't want to assume the story of deliverance.
So he's
a priori,
he's essentially rejecting revelation for the sake of whatever project he's trying to do. It's a little tougher.
Yeah. But he's saying we see history and we know future behavior is best predicted by past behavior. So his criticism of Cohn is, how can Cohn assume that there's going to be deliverance?
Right.
And Cohn is just like, hey, theologians don't reason the same way as philosophers. We don't have to. And there is a little bit of faith to that. And he's like, I'm totally okay being charged with making a little bit of a leap of faith. For Cohn, he assumes the deliverance, but not only does he assume the deliverance, he assumes a generalization of a redeeming God.
What does that mean?
It's not just Israel's deliverance that God is going to deliver. It is the deliverance of the marginalized.
Yes. Okay.
In the particular situation that Cohn is writing in, the marginalized.
Man, these names are too similar.
So we'll only be talking about Cohn from now on.
Cohn,
like a triangle cone.
Yeah, Cohn.
But he accepts that like it is a hope of deliverance, not necessarily like a position that he can fully defend.
Right.
But he asserts it's biblically based, and we see the God throughout the Old Testament, and we see God throughout the New Testament, in this like quest for redemption.
Sure. Yeah.
And one of the ways he does this is he talks about God's special care. If you want to use liberation theology language, we see a preferential option for the poor.
Cool. Okay. Look at you. Wow. Master of the divine.
And I've mastered it. It's been mastered. There's nothing left to do. There's no rock unturned now. And I don't know if Cone talks about this. I'm not a Cone scholar. But I think what really highlights this, something that like blew my mind a little bit, was the social contract that we see God come up with the Israelites in the Old Testament compared to this contract that you see other gods make with their nations or other kings or pharaohs or whatever, like the divine appointed, divinely
What's it called
appointed leader
again?
of the
Seminarian.
nation.
When they make that pact with the God in the name.
Like
of
a covenant, maybe a testament,
like
you might call it.
It's the vassal tribute relation. What's it called again? I actually forgot. I know I'm like, it sounds like I'm being sick. No,
I don't. I think it is vassal.
You know what I'm talking about? The oath, right?
Yeah, it is.
The type of that they would make in the Near East.
Okay, I took Old Testament theology in year 1. Okay,
but that one, that's what they're that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that was before COVID though. That was a different time.
Yeah, so you can forget that, or maybe you never knew.
I knew. Okay, my prof taught me very well. Okay.
Obviously not well enough.
I actually read a lot of that textbook. It's one of the few textbooks that I read a lot of. Anywho,
well,
a lot of other relations still had this concern for the widow and the orphan.
Yes.
And, me being a Marxist, me being from the critical perspective.
Whoa!
I know, big reveal. Yeah.
The first episode.
But yeah, it's easy to analyze that from the critical perspective as the need for the ruling class to promise some level of like a floor for their in-group so that they don't revolt.
Mm-hmm.
What you don't have is an extension of that care for the outsider. Except
in other
except
groups.
In the God of the Bible, where the foreigner is explicitly mentioned.
Interesting.
Yeah, where the outsider, the alien, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm. And that's a like. There's not one instance.
I mean, there might be. I'm not a historian either. I'm not an anthropologist. Okay.
But for the most part,
we have
Israel's
a lot
God is concerned about the foreigner, and that seems to be an exclusive of.
That seems
Yahweh.
to be very unique.
Okay.
When compared to societies in the region. And so from that concern for the outsider, we can start to build this hope for deliverance from racism, from the structures against racism.
Right.
But now what? Mm-hmm. We have the hope. So what are we then to do?
What are we then to do? Whom shall I send?
Whom shall I send?
And I replied to the Lord, send me. Send me. See, that was off the dome.
Off the dome.
Dome.
Know this kid grew up in church.
Let's go.
Yeah. I guess send me to stop racism, I guess would be the unsaid part there. How does someone that benefits from the system of racism address racism?
That's a hard question, dude. Why are you throwing me all these tough questions? This man said, don't prepare anything. You'll be fine. Guess what? I'm not fine.
You're fine.
I'm not fine.
I don't know if this is a bone or if this is a trap. But so there's conceptualizations of the ally, right? The white ally.
Oh, okay.
What do you think about the white ally? I don't know if this is a trap.
Oh no. Oh yeah, that's 100% that's a trap. Dude, get out of here. Get out of here with that. Okay. So what does it mean to be anti-racist?
Okay, you're gonna just avoid the ally question.
Yes.
Okay.
That was the first question, right?
Yes.
What does it mean to be anti-racist as a Christian?
Not just as a Christian.
No, as a white Christian.
Yeah, either white Christian, but even like me as a yellow Christian, we're the model minority. In some ways, we benefit from the colorist, anti-black racist structures in North America. There's obviously ways that we are gated from the highest ends of privilege, so to speak.
Right.
So as people who benefit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. How do we make use of our benefit if we do make use of it at all?
Yeah.
Yeah. What does the Christian do? God, it's such a hard question.
Yeah. What
It's
are
such
we
a
to
difficult.
do?
It's such a difficult question.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like simple answers you can give, but
Okay. Let's start with the simple answers. We're going to solve racism here, simple steps at a time. Number 7 will shock you. Keep listening, folks.
utilizing the privilege, utilizing your privilege in dismantling the systems that allow the privilege to occur. That's a lot of big words to just say. Be conscious of the benefit that you're receiving, and then utilize the benefit in places where, okay, this is getting fucked up in my head. God, I hate you. I hate you. I hate that you did this to me.
Well, let's unpack that a little bit to begin with. But just that base idea.
Okay, wait, let me just say this one thing. Recognize that privilege, that the game of privilege is played zero sum. That in order for you to have privilege, it means that somebody else has to be having a lack.
Right.
And I guess what I was trying to get at was that the benefit that you receive should be used to filling in the hole of that lack. Something like that.
I think you are getting at the central tension of this idea of using your own privilege. Because to use your own privilege, to undo privilege, seems like counterindicated.
Right.
A couple people might say that kind of allyship ends up reaffirming or like redeeming
Right.
whiteness or redeeming privilege.
I totally see that response, and I think that's a valid response. I think the sort of use of privilege model that I was trying to present was something more about making these implicit forms of privilege explicit and utilizing those, rather than like, say, I'm white and I can like start a business easier, and then, okay, because I can start a business easier, I can make a lot of money, and because I can make a lot of money, now I can give back to the communities and all this stuff. That obviously, that is not what I'm talking about. Or maybe not so obviously, but that is not what I'm talking about. All I'm talking about is making the implicit explicit, and in some way that is utilizing your privilege, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I yield the rest of my time.
So we don't want to be these sort of, our orientation has to be more revolutionary than about reformation. Like you were saying, this working within the system, when the system is necessarily pernicious, there seems to be something fundamentally wrong with that. The point has to be to dismantle the system at its core.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think a complete rejection of privilege works towards that end, which is just a little bit of pushback on the allyship response that you were talking about. Because it doesn't seem that we can just throw off our positions.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a writer named Vincent Lloyd, and he talks about how the formation provided by a privileged upbringing will never entirely stop shaping one's life. So we can't ever get rid of it.
Right.
The issue, I think, I guess with allyship more generally, and then I'll go to your point more specifically, was that, yes, like there needs to be obviously some renunciation of privilege or like making it explicit. But oftentimes what happens is, or what that allows for, and what has happened in allyship because of that allowance, is that people will check their privilege at the door to be part of some rally or movement or whatever, or demonstration, and then they'll just pick it back up on the way out. And that gets to maybe a bigger issue of how the system can assimilate even its harshest critics seemingly. Right. Okay. And so I guess the issue with using your privilege or like making it explicit and then trying to leverage whatever power you have to undo the structure sometimes ends up, even in the most benign ways, ends up reaffirming that distinction between privileged and unprivileged. In an article called Neither Ally Nor Accomplice, Jantzen starts to discuss the sort of shortcomings of those paradigms. And while he accepts that paradigmatic shifts are helpful, and so going from ally to accomplice may be helpful, he doesn't see how accomplice is able to ward itself off from this all-consuming nature of the dominant structure.
Okay.
He doesn't see how accomplice will not just get neutered like ally got neutered. Instead, he thinks the problem with allyship or accompliceness or like co-conspirator
Yeah.
is that it's the adjective that comes before those words that's the problem. It's the white
Right.
ally, right? It's the white
Yes.
accomplice, it's the
Yes,
white
yes.
co-conspirator, and it's the whiteness that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so, stemming from Cone, it's like we need to kill the whiteness altogether. There's no way that white supremacy.
You're so radical, buddy. Did you just say we have to kill all white people?
We have to kill whiteness. We have to kill whiteness. Eradicate whiteness.
Agreed.
There is no way that a system built on white supremacy can subsume that. Is the position that Jantzen takes, at least. That it would be self-defeating at that point.
Right. Right.
What I'm going to say next is going to sound ridiculous. So to preface it a little bit, couch it in like maybe a Marxist language. The end goal is to get rid of class. And to get rid of class, we have to become one class at some point before then. Likewise for Cone, he talks about how for the white people, like he thought there was no way white people could help in the black struggle. For him,
Okay.
it was necessary for those people to undergo a conversion,
Right.
to become black.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
To become black.
To
yeah.
become black.
What does it mean to be to become black? Like you're listening to Beyonce all the time?
Okay. All right.
Obviously not. Only on Sundays.
Yeah.
No.
Closed on Sundays, dude.
What does it mean to become black? The yellow man asked the white man.
I will maybe narrow the parameters a little bit, because for Cone, although blackness was symbolic, when he talked about blackness, it was symbolic. It was also literal, right? Because for him, again,
Right.
the particular, whatever the universal claim is, it must capture the particular. And in the particular that he was dealing with, blackness was the marginalized class.
Sure. Yeah.
But he did maintain that it was symbolic in the sense that it was inclusive, right? The
Right.
boundaries of the membership of blackness is permeable
Are you
because
not- are you-
blackness.
I know what you're doing right now.
What
Actually,
am I doing?
You're trying not to give me the answer.
No, we're
You're
not.
trying to safeguard the answer right now.
No.
I
Right now.
see it. I
But-
can hear it.
No, okay. All I'm gonna say is blackness doesn't
Yes,
have to
yes.
do
So
with the
to
skin
become
color.
black
Yes.
for Cone
Yes.
is to take on marginalization.
Yes.
Correct.
But in what way? Because again, the particulars matter for him.
Right. And so for Cone, it would be something like taking on some sort of the consequences of anti-black racism.
Yeah.
Something like that, right? So like
Yeah.
living in a community where the infrastructure isn't so good or something like that.
Right.
Right.
To experience the anti-black racism that happens.
So what my previous iteration of allyship was lacking was a positive element.
Right.
There's the negative element of renouncing your privilege.
Yeah.
But there's also a positive element of taking on some sort of marginalized state.
Right.
And I think a lot of people aren't going to like that, because that just sounds like a lot of self-flagellation, white
Yeah.
guilt, all this stuff. But I don't think it has to be done in a self-flagellating way.
Right.
Yeah, I think it can be done positively.
Right. There's also the renunciation of your privilege is a much more individualistic position. Like it's something I can do on my own.
Right? Yeah. I mean, it would be weird to think of how you could do it by yourself, because you have the markings of privilege already on. Like I can't
Right.
just dye my skin black, right?
Yeah.
It just wouldn't
Yeah,
work.
you can't inject
No, that-
melanin in,
I mean,
your, in your system.
okay,
you know?
I wish, but
Right.
we can cut that out. Snip.
Yeah. Like it's a challenge for sure to be like to move not just from the individual, but now you have to rest on like the community. And then the other thing that's implicit in that shift is that it's a disavowal of the privilege.
Yeah.
And I do want to go back to blackness isn't about skin color, because that might like sound
Bad.
yeah. I do want to say, I think Vincent Lloyd puts it right. He says skin color may overdetermine
Right.
race, but it is not the same thing as race. Cone writes in it, I think this was in his first big book, we all know that a racist structure will reject and threaten a black man in white skin as quickly as a black man in black skin. It accepts and rewards whites in black skins nearly as well as whites in white skin. And I have, honestly, a very clear example of that last part, but I don't know if calling out.
I know.
I don't know if she's still part of the Daily Wire cast, but you
I mean,
know.
she's already been called out now. So.
There you go. Yeah.
Was it Kendrick?
No, it was
Who was it?
Kendrick
No, it was Joyner Lucas.
Joyner. Yeah, this is a great quote too. It's just so well written. This is by Coates, but he
You're not
says,
gonna let me read it? This guy's taking all my airtime.
Yeah.
Race is the child of racism, not the father.
Damn.
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 Yeah.
Damn.
That is, we made up race, or not we made up race. White people made up race so that they could be racist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so for Cone, it's not just that we renounce our privilege, we put it, or we do something good with it. It is a connection to the community of the marginalized. It's to take on the fight of the marginalized as if it was their own or our own.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It is to hope for the end of the marginalizing structure, which is inherently threatening to the people that benefit from that structure. It means that the people who have need to hope that they do not have.
They need to become poor.
They need to become poor.
They need to throw off their riches.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's obviously a little easier said than done. But Cone also thinks it's maybe even impossible.
He thinks it's impossible. Okay. Interesting.
Like there's a part of Cone that's like, I'm not here to walk white people through their conversion. So he doesn't spend a whole lot of time talking through all these positions.
Okay.
But there is a part of that conversion idea that is like very literally spiritual.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Like we cannot on our own become not white.
Yeah.
Become black.
Okay, I see where this is going. I mean, I was sort of gonna make the point before.
Go make the point. Hey, I'll let you make the point.
No.
Yeah.
It was no.
Make the point.
I mean, it's
All
sort
you.
of. No, I've lost my connection there. It's gone.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, no, it's gone.
Maybe if we talk about whiteness as analogous to sin, you can pick up there. Or to use Paul's language, that we must become a new creation. The old must go,
Right.
So what does that mean in a more obviously Christian sense?
What would it require to convert to become a Christian?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question.
Yeah, can I go to God on my own?
Right. So obviously not.
And so what am I supposed to do then?
Traditional orthodoxy.
Yeah.
It seems that you might need a mediator.
You might need some sort of mediator.
Yeah, you might need a little helper.
A little helper?
Yeah, like a little helper. A
Just
little one. I mean, it depends on your view, right?
That's true.
How much help? How
many hands are going?
Yeah. how much help you need?
Yeah.
But I think it's clear that anybody who endures the human experience for a significant amount of time realizes that they're morally flawed, and then they need some help. They need some help doing this.
Yeah. What would you call that?
I don't know, like grace or something.
Yeah, something like a G word, from a
Grace
G
from
guy,
God, maybe.
Yeah.
Salvation, mercy.
Yeah.
I don't know, something like that.
Yeah. So like you were saying, we can't get away from our sinful nature by just force of will. We need to repent. We need to turn away is the phrase we Christians like to throw around.
Mm-hmm.
And there is obviously an aspect of that turning away that is behavioral. We have to perform allyship to bring it back to the context of being an anti-racist. But it also means to ask God to help us become black, for lack of better words. Right? Not for the sake of like self-flagellation or just becoming a martyr for the sake of becoming a martyr.
Right.
But we want to ask God for the very scary thing of like material insecurity so that we can better understand the standpoint and motivation of the marginalized. And also from that position, we can then fight to actually dismantle the structures that are upholding the current system.
Right. And I think something that needs to be emphasized in that analysis is that the end goal is not being marginalized, right? We are aiming towards something greater. Marginalization is not the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. The end point is not to become black necessarily, but by becoming black to end the class distinction or the race distinction such that there would be no unjust power
foregoing
dynamic.
Whiteness to get rid of whiteness and taking on blackness to get rid of blackness.
That was basically my last point.
Mm-hmm.
I know I do want to make a point about. All right, then. Chill out. Okay, we got there. We got there in the end. Good for you. I'm proud, but don't be that proud.
Yeah, I'm not.
I do want to point out though, like it is a tall order. It is maybe not
100%.
Yeah, it's not comfortable for everyone. I know seminarians that would be like, No,
Yeah,
God blessed
it's
me
the
with
it's
this.
the rich man who approaches Jesus and can't sell all his belongings, sell
There you
everything
go.
you own. Oh no, but he was a rich man and he didn't want to. He had a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a lot of privileges.
Yeah. But I will quote the late, great Tim Keller.
Okay, rest in peace.
Actually,
Rest
you
in
can
peace.
quote the late, great Tim Keller.
Thank you for giving me this honor. If God is real, why do we assume he will perfectly align with our views? If he never challenges our assumptions, you may have a made-up God. We should expect God to challenge us on what we think is right somewhere in our lives economically, socially, sexually, and personally. Sexually? Why did he put sexually there?
Anyway,
Classic.
the point is that like we need to get the order of operations right. Right? We are made in God's image and not the other way around.
Bed mass.
Bed
for sure.
masked. Yeah.
I
So
got
being
it.
Christian shouldn't just be hard or like intellectually challenging, but it sort of requires us to live our lives in a supererogatory way. You know,
I like that.
we gotta go
I
beyond.
think I put you on that. Yeah, 100%. Because I agree with that too much.
I agree with
I feel
my
like
position.
that's my idea. Like the life Jesus lived was not just doing what is permissible and what was required of him. He went
Yeah.
over and beyond. You didn't quote any scripture in your whole
No,
little thing.
there was no source text for this episode.
Because Philippians 2:6 would have been good. This is one of the most beautiful Bible verses ever. They put the Bible behind a paywall. Why would they do that?
I don't know.
This is ridiculous. Okay. Bible Gateway, good for y'all for not putting the Bible behind a paywall. Philippians 2:6-11. This is the NIV. Who being in the very nature God did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father.
Amen. Dude.
That's a
Amen.
banger. Oh, if there's anybody who has thrown off privilege and taken on everything that is not privilege, the negative of it, that's Jesus. That's the whole point of the incarnation.
The whole point.
They took the form of a servant. God himself, the man who made black holes,
That
became
was
a
the first thing
servant.
that comes to mind.
Okay, dude, black holes are pretty majestic.
It's cool.
No, they're not just cool.
They're cool. All right, dude.
Okay, I don't know. I can't convince you if you think they're just cool, or
It's
like
just, you know,
like a
it's just
like a what are those little jellyfish that you showed me that like fight to impregnate the other one?
they're flatworms.
Flatworms. The God who made flatworms.
That's true.
Became a flatworm.
That's bordering heresy.
Maybe that's too heretical.
Maybe.
It gets the point across.
It gets the point across.
Gets the point across. Would you become a flatworm?
I would not become a flatworm.
Exactly. C.S. Lewis makes that point. He says,
I would not
no
become
matter how much you love dogs, and no matter how much distress dogs were in, you wouldn't become a dog and sit at the feet of your beloved, just looking up at them. You wouldn't do that. But that's what we got to do. That was the point, right? That was the point. We got to become.
I mean, this is your point. You're
gotta-
the one
we gotta
making
be-
this point.
We got to become empty, right?
Yeah.
Sell everything. Sell all our possessions. Become poor.
Yeah.
In so many senses of the word.
Yeah.
I don't know how we can be comfortable with having so much.
Yeah.
And maybe that needs to be qualified. Like, we need to be life affirming as Christians. Life is meant to be enjoyed.
Yeah.
And there's
But,
so many good things to be enjoyed. But it's the fact, and it needs to be emphasized what I said before, that it's a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
That it doesn't necessarily have to be a zero-sum game, but me having more is directly correlated with somebody else having less.
Right.
I can enjoy, but when my enjoyment comes at the cost of somebody else, that's when it becomes problematic.
Yeah.
And that's the situation, unfortunately, that we're all in. And that's the whole, there's no ethical consumption under capitalism. Like, it doesn't seem that we can be in a place where we can morally have so much, where we can have so much and be morally acceptable.
Yeah. We'll wrap it up with my benediction that I took way too long to write. Like, I don't know how many words this is. This is 14 words. Oh, that's a bad number to have, actually. There's
14?
Yeah, I think there's some anti-Semitic shit that talks about 14 words because they're like created. I don't know. Now I'm backpedaling.
Why would you say that?
Now I'm backpedaling. God.
Don't say that. We're gonna get flagged.
Oh, God.
Just add another word.
No. I leave you guys with a benediction. May the God of the oppressed bless you, correct you, and make you black.
That was 14 words?
That was 14 words, apparently. Stop saying 14 words. We got cat. I'm pretty sure that's like a thing that neo-Nazis use. I don't know. I'm going to Google it right now. Yeah, so right now, my introduction I have is the fake church service run by a seminarian and failed grad student in hopes to dunk and debunk the funky shit that sometimes comes with Christianity a la carte.
That's pretty good.
It's a little flavorful, a little
like
spicy.
A little spicy.
A little spicy. But
Little
yeah, you don't want the
fruity.
fake church?